is where.
Hey gang, so what's up? Aaron right here, Canadian Looney. Where is the Liberals' budget for the spring? There's not going to be one tabled, doesn't sound like. Almost unheard of. But don't worry, CBC's David Cochrane is going to defend it all. He's chatting here with MP Adam Chambers, a conservative, and man, it's different when the CBC is talking to the conservatives, isn't it? Let's take a look and a listen. Let's get right into it. This stuff is hard to watch, man. Like, this David Cochrane is really obnoxious. Let's take a look.
Oh, yeah.
Me, David.
Your leader in your party has criticized the lack of a budget, saying it amounts to a lack of a plan. We do have a clear sense, I think, of the immediate priorities of the government. So is it really a lack of a plan? What's your sense?
Well,
Okay, no budget. There probably is a plan, but they're not telling us what it is.
David, first, it would be highly unusual for a government to miss a budget. You'll recall probably in the last 20 years, COVID being the only time when the government was unable to deliver a budget, and perhaps rightfully so in the moment. But we just had an election campaign where the Prime Minister and his surrogates were saying that it was the Liberals who had a plan. I think the Prime Minister said a plan beats no plan any day, referring back to a Churchill quote. And yet here we are, it's ready for prime time. Where is it, and what can Canadians expect with respect to this moment in time, which the Prime Minister also referred to as a crisis?
Right.
And not even 1 week ago, the Bank of Canada was ringing the alarm bells in a very rare but sobering press conference where it said, the economic situation is very uncertain going forward. So I think Canadians deserve to know the financial health of the government and see what proposals the Prime Minister intends to bring forward. We will have gone almost a year and a half by the time budgetary legislation comes forward in the fall if the government keeps to the timeline it's recently suggested.
Right. So Canadians need to know an update on the financial health of the government. You can do that without a budget, right? They could give us a fiscal statement, an economic statement in the month that Parliament's apparently going to sit. But they don't seem to even be doing that. I mean, would you accept a situation where you would get an updated set of numbers and then more of a budget style document in the fall? Because the election was only 3 weeks ago. So
But they're supposed to have a budget ready. David Cochrane, it's obnoxious. It's not journalism, whatever it is you're doing here.
there is a time constraint challenge here for the finance department at minimum.
Well, I would say two things, David. First, of course, the throne speech would have elements in it that would perhaps also appear in a budget that is normal. So yes, absolutely. I think the government has a point to make there. But I would say, again, they ran an election suggesting that they had a plan ready to go. The Department of Finance is filled with incredibly capable people who will have been working on a budget starting well before January, and then including the promises that the party made during the election. So my suspicion is that there is a budget basically ready to go. The question is, why is the Prime Minister deciding?
Like, these Liberals do have a plan for Canadians. Eats the bugs.
To not bring it forward now. The Prime Minister's also said that he'd like to change the accounting rules of the government. That could also be presenting a bit of a problem. But I think the Prime Minister is not getting off to a good start. He's setting himself up for a bit of a run-in, I think, with the rating agencies, perhaps with the Auditor General, and even in the Parliamentary Budget Officer, with respect to not showing just reasonable transparency in terms of the fiscal projections of the government. We're asking parliamentarians to vote on a tax cut that may cost the government upwards of $5 or $6 billion. But we don't know how we're going to pay for it. So, obviously tax cuts are good from a conservative perspective, but we also said we had to look at the spending side. But, these are things that discussions you would have with other parliamentarians after you see a budget and a proposed fiscal plan. So, look, if the government would like to just show us a table of where it thinks the revenues are coming and the expenses are coming and how much we're spending on debt, that would be a fiscal update, if you will. I think that would be better than nothing, of course.
Right.
But I do think, the Prime Minister ran on having a plan. I think Canadians deserve to see what that is.
But you worked for Jim Flaherty, I think, when he was finance minister. Am I remembering that correctly? Before you were elected yourself. I mean, the election was April 28th. They're still counting and recounting and litigating some of the ridings. I mean, do you credit, like, if you won government last month, I mean, do you credibly think you could have a budget ready to go by the early weeks of June?
Well, David, I would make...
Pretty sure the Conservatives would have a budget ready, right? Like, they're fiscally responsible compared to these Liberals.
2 quick points. Yes, I did work for Finance Minister Jim Flaherty, who was a great mentor to me, and I think one of the greatest finance ministers of my generation, or our lifetime, frankly. But let's go back to look at what happened there. Federal election, government changeover in 2006, throne speech and a budget very shortly after the election. Election in 2008, throne speech, budget very shortly after the election. And by the way, 2008, during economic kind of upheaval, by the way, Mr. Carney was working in the Department of Finance at that time as well, so he's well aware of the planning that is already done by the department officials during an election. And the second point I would make is, this is a contrast that is appearing, and I'm not sure the Prime Minister is aware of the contrast that he's setting up. Pierre Poilievre said that Conservatives, if elected, and even in this current state, would be willing to work all summer to pass the necessary legislation in order to deliver the support, not just to Canadian families, but to the Canadian economy in a time of crisis. And Prime Minister Carney is getting off to not a great start by saying, look, we're going to bring Parliament back for a couple of weeks and then we're going to break for the summer. But trust us, don't worry, we'll come back with some ideas in the fall.
Nonsense.
There are a number of things that require legislation. The GST cut for new homes, as an example, which Conservatives supported during the election. In fact, ours was beyond just first-time home buyers. That requires legislation. The personal income tax reduction requires legislation. Any changes to capital gains tax rates, which Conservatives also supported, also require legislation. If you think about some of the changes that people have talked about with respect to the Impact Assessment Act, which is the new pipelines bill, or other regulatory reforms, all of these things require legislation. It just is a bit bewildering why we might not be wanting to debate and table those amendments, very necessary amendments, to get our economy moving right now. I mean, time is of the essence. People are making investment decisions. I just think it's not a good look for the country or inspire confidence amongst investors, rating agencies, or just everyday Canadians.
Well, in 2006, if my memory...
Cochrane is going to try to stick up for the Liberals again.
Stephen Harper was sworn in as Prime Minister February 6th. The budget was May 2nd. So if we do get a large-scale financial document from the Carney government in, say, October, I mean, it's not that different than those timelines, right? Doesn't it, if you're going to get...
His shit is weak, man. David Cochrane, look in the mirror. Look inside yourself, David Cochrane.
Some stuff in June, and then, September when Parliament comes back. I mean, who knows when the fall economic statement will come. And they're pushing into December under the last Prime Minister. But early in the fall, would that satisfy, do you think, if we get something like that, and, certainly before Halloween?
David, we'll spend all day talking about hypotheticals.
Look inside yourself, David. Come on, you little Q-tip bald fool.
But let's see what the minister has said. The fall is the fall.
Sure.
So, this is a government who waited until the last possible day to table the public accounts. The previous government ended their parliamentary, reign, not abiding by House orders to produce documents, waiting until the final days to table public accounts, asking parliamentarians to vote on spending measures before even being given the closing of the books from the previous years. I think if Mr. Carney, or Prime Minister Carney, is trying to demonstrate a change from Prime Minister Trudeau's government, this is not the way that I would have recommended he start.
So a final question or a final point to get into, Mr. Chambers, is your party has talked about reflecting and listening and changing. Will things change when Parliament comes back on the 26th? Parliament was pretty much gummed up because of this standoff over the privilege motion, over the production of documents for months.
Gummed up. That's what he's describing it as. And he calls himself a journalist reporter. He's something else, guys. He's a deception. He's a con. He's the long con.
Months during the last Parliament. Is that coming back? Do the Conservatives plan to bring back this demand for the production of documents that the RCMP has said it isn't the right way to do it, but the government clearly was violating the privilege of the House by not complying with it, but it led to this standoff that made Parliament totally non-functional? What's your sense of whether that issue resurfaces?
Well, David, I wouldn't prejudge any discussions with my colleagues or other parliamentarians. You'll recall that the House order included support from all other parties in the House except for the government. So, that would be a discussion for multiple parties to have. I would say, the government, if it was wanting to start off on a positive note, would either A, produce the documents that were asked for the last Parliament, or B, which is a suggestion I had made that they didn't take up on, was recovering the $400 million that the Auditor General said went to companies that were ineligible. Now, look, we just had an election.
Come on.
And the public is interested in doing things that are for the benefit of all Canadians. I do think it is a disturbing pattern to have a Parliament or a party in the House of Parliament not comply with a vote of the majority of the members. So, look, it's an issue that is important to me, just as someone who believes in parliamentary supremacy. I'm not sure, that's the first thing out of the gate we'll be discussing. I'll leave that to the experts in the House leaders' offices and other parliamentarians. But, I am keeping it in the back of my mind as something to recall. And by the way, the Auditor General is the one who said that hundreds of millions of dollars ended up in companies that didn't deserve to receive it in the first place. So I think, this is an issue that's probably not going away completely, but I think the government could do a good faith effort by either producing the documents or recovering some of the funds.
Okay, well, we'll see what happens after the King has finished his speech on the 27th. Adam Chambers, Ontario Conservative MP. Good to have you back on the show, sir. Thanks for your time today.
I look forward to being back more, David.
All right, thank you.
God damn it, that's not news!
So, there we go. David Cochrane is a problem, guys. There's no doubt about that. He just is. So, what we're going to take a peek at now, we've got a little Michelle Rempel Garner here to show. I like Michelle Rempel Garner, the way she breaks things down. She makes it easy to understand.
Oh, yeah.
So many of you might have already heard something really concerning about the federal Liberal government led by Mark Carney now. And that's that they're planning to not have a federal budget this year. Virtually everybody in the country was expecting a budget to be tabled because the Liberals have really not provided any sort of transparency on the state of Canadian finances in some time. This is a big concern. So again, the federal Liberals they've said that they don't intend to table a budget. And I mean, putting this really simply, you're expected to have a budget. Anybody that runs a household has a budget. So why would it be that the federal Liberals think that they shouldn't have to table a budget at all? It's actually worse than you think. So I want to walk you through just how bad the lack of transparency is with the current state of finances in the Canadian federal government. And I want you to share this video. So again, regardless of how people vote, they understand how bad the situation is and how hard it is for a member of parliament to do their job because the government just isn't being forthcoming with the state of the nation's finances. So let's go through this quickly. So the process of allocating funds to various government initiatives it's sometimes referred to as the supply process. And that supply has to be approved by Parliament. But there are situations in which the government can continue to spend without necessarily Parliament's approval. And there's a variety of different scenarios in which that can happen. But what's happened most recently, you'll remember, is that the Liberals delayed their fall economic update by several months last fall. And you'll remember that then Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland, the day that it was supposed to be tabled, she resigned as Finance Minister. And the result was that there wasn't really a lot of debate on that, if any at all. The fall economic update, which was tabled in December, late, showed that the Liberal government, of which Mark Carney was a senior economic advisor at the time, had blown well past, over 50% past its already high inflationary deficit spending estimates. So over 50%, it had overshot its already crazy deficit budget. Then you'll remember that they prorogued Parliament, right? So what happened was Parliament didn't sit. It didn't sit in January, it didn't sit in February, it didn't sit in March. They shuttered Parliament so that the Liberal leadership could happen. And then they went into a federal election. So what that meant is that the government, like the executive branch of government, the federal Liberals, they essentially approved interim spending during the time without any parliamentary debate whatsoever. And that was crazy. So billions upon billions of dollars of interim spending without parliamentary approval because of the prorogation process and then because of the election. Now, I'm going to rewind one more time. This stuff was happening not with parliamentary debate, but the government last year also failed to put forward something called the public accounts. Think of the public accounts of the federal government basically as your bank statement, your checking account statement, let's say. In this case, it would be a credit card statement, but I digress. It's essentially a snapshot of what the government said they would spend money on and then what they actually did spend money on. Those were tabled, I think it was 9 months late in December, the day that Parliament rose. So I had the opportunity, I subbed in to the committee that was looking at this, and we only had one 5-minute round of questions with finance officials to look at the entirety of the public accounts and scrutinize them and ask questions about them. Billions upon billions upon billions of dollars. And then the Liberals shut down that meeting so that we couldn't question officials. So not only did they table their fall economic statement late, and we didn't get a chance to scrutinize it or debate it, but they also tabled essentially their bank account statement that they're supposed to provide to Parliament to review, months late, 9 months late, and now they're saying that they won't table a federal budget and that they're just going to keep spending without any sort of parliamentary scrutiny or any sort of parliamentary debate. Essentially what they're going to expect me and all MPs in the House of Commons to do is approve supply spending without reviewing the public accounts, without having a budget, without really understanding the nation state of affairs. And that's really crazy when you consider the crises that we're facing in this country right now, right? You think about the housing crisis, crime, there's a lot of foreign policy issues that are, going to be requiring the government to respond, the least of which is Canada's, deeply underserviced military. And they're going to be just saying, well, just trust us, just trust me. We're just going to keep spending, not tell you how much we're spending, not really give you a sense of the picture of where the nation's finances are at, but whatever. Oh, and by the way, we prorogued Parliament for 3 or 4 months. So we're just going to go into the summer and don't worry about scrutinizing any of these things. I worry that, even over the summer with Parliament in theory in session, even if it's not sitting, that we're not going to have the ability to do any of these things because the Liberals, as we've seen over the last year, they've found loophole after measure to not tell you, the Canadian people, how they're spending your money, which frankly, we don't even have, right? Now, this is where it gets even worse. So we already have this situation where we don't really know what the nation's finances look like. We don't know how they're going to be spending the money because they're not tabling a budget. I can't even believe this. I can, but I can't believe I'm having this conversation with you because we're talking about billions of dollars here. We're talking about a nation's future. I digress. So not only were we not going to do that, you know, they've been extremely opaque about how they are going to pay for their recent election campaign financing, right? So their recent election campaign promises, I should say. So there was an article that came out, it was during the campaign, I think, or right afterwards, and it didn't get a lot of media attention, but it was a credit rating agency that said that if the federal Liberals implemented Mark Carney's deficit spending, which was actually much higher than even Justin Trudeau's, that Canada's credit rating would be downgraded. And what that means, you guys know what it means if your credit rating drops. It's more expensive to borrow money, right? And so the debt servicing cost on all of that debt, which we don't even know really how big the debt is because the government has not been telling you this, they haven't been telling me this, that cost of servicing that debt could increase. So, and on top of all this, guys, and this is really, again, I need you to share this video so that people understand the seriousness of the situation. There's data that has come out that suggests that Canada may already be in a recession. That means that our economic growth is contracting. That means that it's less likely that job-creating companies are going to invest in creating jobs. It means people might lose their jobs. And while that's happening, there's also data that suggests that inflation, particularly in key areas like grocery prices, continues to rapidly increase, well beyond the Bank of Canada's estimates or their target for what inflation should be. So you have, on one hand, this suggestion that the Canadian economy is shrinking, but that inflation is rising, which means that the cost of living is going up while the prospects of jobs are going down and government revenue is going down. You have the Bank of Canada as well saying they're not sure what they're going to do with rates in this scenario. You've got credit rating agencies saying that they might downgrade Canada's federal credit rating because Mark Carney's spending is so high. And then the Liberals are not tabling a budget. They're hiding this from you. And folks, again, I don't care how you vote. You know, we can have debates on how and if we should spend tax dollars in Canada or go into have a deficit situation where we add to the debt. We can have political debates on that. But every Canadian should want to know exactly how much money the government is spending, how they plan to allocate that funding. Because if we don't understand that, how can we address any of these crises? How can we even have that political debate about how or if we should be spending money in certain areas? If there's no budget, there's no debate to be had. And if there's no debate that's happening, that's actually deeply anti-democratic. By not tabling a budget, by delaying the public accounts by 9 months and then proroguing Parliament for months and months. I mean, it's now 5 months since I sat in that room for 5 minutes with the finance deputy minister and got 2 questions in on billions of dollars of spending. That's like I'm being prevented from doing my job. Right? As a member of Parliament, I was just elected. I was given close to a 60% mandate by my community to fight for them on these issues. But if the federal government is just blocking all of this information, they're blocking my ability to scrutinize their decisions. How can I even vote on these issues in the House of Commons? Like, they're asking me to stand in the House of Commons and vote one way or the other on information that I just don't have because they won't put it forward. And that's anti-democratic. So, let's say you voted Liberal in the last election, or NDP, or whatever. Let's say you didn't vote Conservative. I'm talking to you right now. We can disagree on how to spend money, but we should agree that the federal government has an obligation to provide Canadians with this information, right? And that's why I need you to share this video. The other thing is Mark Carney campaigned on, being this fiscal guru, right? He was going to save Canada with all of his economic bona fides. And day one on the job, what does he say? We're not tabling a budget. There's no plan there, right? This is just more of the exact same thing we saw under Justin Trudeau and Mark Carney's leadership as the Liberal senior economic advisor, where they did everything to prevent this information from getting to you and to members of Parliament, right? So this has to be, Canadians need to rise up against this. They need to say, no, there needs to be a federal budget. Now, I want to rest assured that Conservatives, we've been meeting, we've been thinking about ways and tools by which we can compel this information. excuse me, from the federal government. But we also need the Canadian public, everybody from all political stripe, Liberal voters specifically, to say, no, the government has an obligation to tell the Canadian people what the state of affairs are of the nation's finances and how they plan to spend money, right? So that debate needs to happen in Parliament. That's why we have Parliament, ostensibly, right? My job is to hold the government to account, to hold the executive branch of government to account. And they need to follow through with their democratic obligation to allow me to do that. So folks, share this video. And, you know, we're going into the long weekend in a couple of short days here. If you're talking to folks, if you're having a family gathering or gathering with neighbors over the weekend or whatever, make sure that you have a polite and respectful conversation. Sometimes it's difficult to talk about politics. I understand this. But this should be a unifying issue. Regardless of how someone votes, they should make sure that everybody would agree that we need to understand how the federal government is budgeting, how they are spending money. And for the federal Liberals to just start right out of the gate and say, no, after months of prorogation, after general election, after delaying the public accounts for 9 months last year, we're not going to have a budget, sorry. They didn't even say sorry. They're like, we're not going to tell you. We're just going to ask Parliament to keep spending money. Maybe they won't even ask Parliament. I don't know. I mean, this is the least transparent government on finances in Canadian history. So share this video. This is what I'm going to be spending the long weekend doing, is trying to figure out ways to compel this information and to raise awareness of the fact that it's not happening. But I need you to help me get the word out. I need you to share this video, and I need you to talk to friends and say there needs to be a federal budget. There needs to be scrutiny of the public accounts, and Parliament shouldn't be, neutered by a federal government who will not do its base job of telling the Canadian public what the state of play is for our finances and how they intend to spend money going forward. Working hard for you. Have a great day.
And finally tonight, a new development in the Canada strike. For those of you who don't remember or don't care, Canada has been striking for more money.
Yeah, all right. I told you. Listen.
In a shocking turn of events, it now appears that thousands of people from Denmark are flooding into the United States with hopes of taking the place of the striking Canadians.
What?